I want to welcome the people that are with us today. Our agenda is that we want to welcome everybody and call out some of the people that are with us today. Spend a few minutes talking about structured on-the-job training, what it is and how it's been used. I want to share a little bit of information about today's challenge. I don't know if I need to say too much. Most of you are involved in the challenges of today, but there are certain challenges that I think we can share and discuss a little bit. I want to share with you a little bit of a description about SiTUATE. SiTUATE is the digital platform that's been developed as an alternative to the face-to-face structured on-the-job training, the traditional structured on-the-job training. What's really good about this webinar, really exciting about this webinar, is that we will have a SiTUATE demonstration, and you'll be able to see an example of how it supports a particular apprenticeship program, an IT apprenticeship program. And then we'll have time for a discussion and any of your questions and thoughts about the platform and what it can do and how it might be appropriate for you. So again, I want to thank everybody for coming. The session is being recorded, and so it will be available to people that aren't able to make it on time. I know that there's a lot of people, there's some people here that I know very well, all the way from Pakistan to, let me see some of the others that we have here from Chicago area and Florida. But we have here, I know I'm looking at the list here, there's people here from Bahrain and Korea and Cambodia and even in Africa. So I'm not sure where they are, but I'm sure that they will view the recording of the session. So again, welcome to everybody and thank you very much for your time. I want to spend a little bit of time without dragging it through, maybe about 10 minutes or so, just giving a brief about structured on-the-job training. Structured on-the-job training was developed around 1986 when I was a faculty member at Ohio State University, and it came out of a project that I did along with some graduate students with a company in Columbus, Ohio. It seemed to be a logical alternative to what the organization was going to try to do, and that was to have some self-paced materials for employees. But in this case, we identified experienced employees as trainers, and that training would occur in the actual work setting. By doing it that way, the focus was on job expectations, on tasks, not necessarily topics, training topics, but starting from the perspective of what are the tasks that people perform, and then identifying what those tasks are, documenting them, and developing the training around that information. And because there's so much convergence between the tasks and what people do on their jobs in actuality, it has been relatively easy to document the impact of structured on-the-job training over the years in terms of what we call training efficiency and also training effectiveness. If you go to the SiTUATE website, you'll find a listing of the resources that you can link to and find some of these research articles for further information. So we are we have a high level of confidence about this idea of structured on-the-job training can actually accomplish what we seek to achieve in the work setting in terms of our training objectives. The first mention of structured on-the-job training, as an aside, came way back in 1987. And yes, that's me in 1987. It seems hardly like it was yesterday. But in fact, it was the first known mention of this approach in the literature, and it came in from the ISPI journal, Performance and Instruction, back in 1987. So just to kind of give you a little bit of that. And of course, if anybody's interested in knowing more about these articles that I'm mentioning, please contact us, and they are available in the literature, and I can share these with you. Over the years, there have been research articles, as I mentioned, about structured on-the-job training. On the left is a book that I published, the second edition on S-OJT, as I call it in a shorthand version. And on the right is a new book, 2019, on work analysis. And that's a complementary book to the structured on-the-job training because of the need for us to understand what it is that people do in the workplace. And Pete, thank you very much for the extra plug. We can always use that extra plug. So this information that we're going to share with you today is part of the work that I've been doing for a long time, as you can see, working with clients and the intellectual property that has evolved from those various activities. When I think of structured on-the-job training, I think of it as a planned process, of course, structured, of having an experienced employee, not necessarily a person from HR or HRD, but an experienced employee, but it could be almost anybody, train a novice employee on a unit of work in the actual work setting. And so what's interesting about that is that, you know, the relative notion of being a novice employee, we know that it's not only just a new hire or an apprentice, but it could be people who are being retrained. That seems quite important today as we see the work has changed dramatically over the past 2 years. Now, also part of that definition is the last part, or a setting that resembles the work setting, because we know that increasingly training is occurring within the context of labs and other areas for apprentices or trainees that are in a workplace in a training institution. So S-OJT is in the context of the work setting, but the work setting has some variability of what that might mean. We have looked at many different case studies and have developed many case studies related to S-OJT, and we find that there are about 4 different ways that people are using structured on-the-job training in organizations. One way is when there's an immediate performance issue that's cropped up and has to be addressed. And the reason there may be a performance issue, the cause of the performance issue, is ascribed to a lack of knowledge and skills. And so a training program might be important to use. So S-OJT is used in a sense, in a strategic sense, to address something that's happening now when there's too much rework, defects, something is not quite right, and there's a need for a training program to address that. Another way people have been using S-OJT is for cross-training and to increase employee flexibility. And that has a lot to do in many organizations that are more process oriented, so that people are flowing from one part of the process to another part of the process, and they're being asked to switch off and to be available at different parts of the process. Another way that S-OJT has been used is that it's blended with other training approaches. For example, there might be a management training program where in the either online setting or in the training classroom, but I'm not sure to what extent that's occurring now, that the trainees would learn the concepts, and then they would learn how to perform and to apply the concepts using S-OJT. So the 2 training approaches would be blended together. In some of the projects that we're dealing with today, we're looking at an entire job. And that would be true for apprenticeship programs that has been true for some of the other projects that we've done in the past, and that we would look at the entire job. Of course, the prerequisites to the job would not be necessarily be done through S-OJT. So in a sense, some of these projects having to look at an entire job are sort of a blended approach as well, both either online or classroom training and then S-OJT. But it's good to note that it's the S-OJT that drives the other, as opposed to the classroom training drives the skill development, the skills learning. I'm going to show you 2 slides here, and I can't expect you to see everything on the slide, but I just want to share with you a little bit about some of the major case studies that we've been involved with over the last number of years. Not an entirely conclusive list, but you can see some larger clients and some smaller clients as well. Some companies that you might recognize, but we are very interested, even with our interest in SiTUATE, we are interested in outcomes. We want to know what is the problem. We want to know how we can impact the problem. And that's really important for us, not only from the perspective of structured on-the-job training, but also as we think about how we deliver S-OJT through SiTUATE as well. I'm going to share one more page with this so you can just see this. We have worked with a number of private sector companies, large and small, workforce development agencies overseas, community colleges for credit and also non-credit components of community colleges, and also NGOs. The one at the bottom of the screen, Engender Health, is a very interesting case study where they use structured on-the-job training to train field workers in India. So these would be clinical people that do checkups and administer some healthcare to individuals, to women in villages. And the healthcare workers aren't necessarily professionals, but they've been trained to do certain tasks. Well, this is all fine and good, but we know that things have changed and we have some challenges. When you think about structured on-the-job training in a sense emanated from the work from the training within industry project that occurred during World War II. And there's even quite good evidence of using structured on-the-job training, some form of it, during World War I as well. But when we think about S-OJT, we think about it being very prominently in terms of the production war effort during World War II and the TWI project. Many people know that picture of Rosie the Riveter and her working in a production plant. It wasn't until the 1980s that the discussion about learning in the workplace picked up again, and I put a picture of my book to represent that. But now the challenge today that we have is, how are we going to address the challenges that we have in the workplace and the rapid changing of work as well? One of the things that many organizations talk about today, is probably is this idea of digital transformation. How organizations are making that transition with a greater reliance on digital technology. Part of that's because of greater efficiency, but also greater effectiveness, and it has trickled down to our training practices as well. About a year and a half ago, I investigated whether or not it might be possible to use S-OJT to have a digital platform for structured on-the-job training. And I'm very pleased to share with you today, as part of our webinar, the outcome of that investigation, which is SiTUATE. My partner is a company in Columbus, Ohio, called Grad Leaders. And in just a few minutes, we're going to show you a demonstration of the platform. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dave Hoy, who will conduct the demonstration. But when I decided to investigate whether or not it'd be possible to have a digital platform for S-OJT, I wanted to make sure that certain critical criteria were addressed. The first was I recognized that a lot of digital or online programs available were focusing more on topics and not on skills. And this was a problem. I think many organizations realized that a lot of online programs had a lot of limitations on what training objectives that they could actually achieve. So their focus on skills development had to remain. Another aspect of it was that it had to have a seamless design process. In other words, people would be doing all the necessary things to design effective instruction, effective training, without really going through the lockstep process of having to say phase 1, phase 2, and things like that. But in fact, they would be doing that process nevertheless. Another aspect that's important for me was the flexible delivery. So SiTUATE allows people to either deliver S-OJT in a remote way, where the trainer and trainee or trainees might be separated from each other, or they could also do it in a live face-to-face situation in a traditional sense as well. Another criteria was we wanted to make it easier for organizations. One of the issues that many organizations have difficulty with is job and task analysis. And we know that's an issue for many organizations, but how to make that easier, how to make it so that organizations can engage in those kinds of activities without overburdening the staff and the subject matter experts. And finally, we wanted to make sure that there were value-added components that we're going to show you today, things that could never have been accomplished otherwise without the digital platform being used. We're going to show you those as we go forward here. I'm giving you a sneak peek of what the platform, of what the dashboard of SiTUATE looks like as a solution. And before I turn it over to Dave, I want to share with you just a little bit more overview of what you are about to see during the demonstration, if that's okay. This is the dashboard. The dashboard, as Dave's going to explain to you, is after you log in, that SiTUATE would be for trainees, trainers. It could be for the designers, the analysts, and managers. And when we think about apprenticeship programs, there's also for the training institution to be able to have access as well. In a minute, you'll see, I keep making this promise in a minute, so I have to fulfill that promise. But you'll see that you will see that there's some drop downs where it says analyze work, training guides, training and meetings, trainers and trainees, and evaluations and reports. And so what this is telling us, I'm going to change the screen here and give you a quick rundown. What this is giving us is that it gives us a way to do templates to do a job analysis, templates to do a task analysis, an occupational analysis. I'm going to show you in a few minutes the crosswalk of what that means. And it also gives you a template to do a skills gap analysis for planning as well. And as you can see, you're going to see the trainer guides, the trainee guides. There's also an onboarding template to develop an onboarding module. And of course, there's a way for the trainer to schedule the training with the trainee as well. And I'll let Dave talk about the management component there of trainers and trainees in just a minute. And finally, the evaluation and reports, it prepares the information for you so that anybody can look in either from the training institution side or from the employer side, if we're talking about an apprenticeship program, to be able to check on individual students or the group of students that might be working within an employer situation. This is my last slide before I turn it over to Dave, but I want to tell you what he's going to show you as a quick overview. we've been working on an apprenticeship program, an IT apprenticeship program for the occupation called Tech Support Specialist. And so what you're going to see in just a minute is how SiTUATE is able to develop the occupational standard. Well, it doesn't do it for you, but you do have to do it, but it makes it easier for you to do it, to adapt that occupational standard to a job analysis. It helps you identify the duty statements and the tasks from that job analysis. It gives you a template to be able to conduct a task analysis. You know, a lot of people are mystified by some of this information, and we hope to demystify this information partly by making it easier to do, preparing the training guides. And also he will show you these performance checks, which occur at the end of each training session, so that it's documented that people have actually performed the tasks. And of course, the connection between the performance check and the training plan. Okay, my last, I don't know if this is going to make any sense. Maybe we'll come back to this at the end of the demonstration. But I was under the impression that a number of our participants today would be interested in SiTUATE from an apprenticeship perspective. And what that important for that is that to show what's called a crosswalk. The crosswalk is the relationship between the occupational standards and the tasks that were identified through the job analysis. And to be able to chart for an apprentice, to be able to chart in the cells what tasks they have completed, what tasks that they have completed the training on, and how that relates to the occupational standard is a pretty important thing to do in order for that person to show that they have achieved that occupation in terms of showing that they have the competence to be able to do the major parts of that occupation. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dave Hoy. I'm going to stop share and want to thank everybody's attention up to this point now and introduce my colleague, Dave Hoy.
Thank you, Ron. Hi, everybody. Appreciate your time today. Hopefully you're seeing my browser okay with the SiTUATE platform dashboard located there. A quick word about what the heck is Grad Leaders. We are a software company, as Ron said, out of Columbus, Ohio. We have been in the collegiate and university career services software business for a couple of decades. We've branched out a bit in the last 5 years. We are also working a lot with employers now, managing internship programs, and we've got a few other lines on our product as well. So while SiTUATE itself is a relatively new product, the platform that it's sitting on is not new. It's a very mature and proven platform that hosts many tens of thousands of users every day across the world. So we have met up with Ron. We talked about his needs, and we realized we were very close to having what he needed. And with some customization, the SiTUATE platform became a reality, as he said about 6 months ago. Happy to show it to you now. We'll do this at a high level. We will certainly welcome questions at the end here, and hope this is helpful for you. So we're sitting here in the dashboard that an administrator would use. The administrator has everything turned on. It's worth knowing a couple of things about the platform in general. A, it is highly customizable and white labeled. So what do I mean by white labeled? That means if your organization were to acquire a license to SiTUATE, you would have a site that's branded to your organization using your logos, your colors, terminology changes could be implemented and so forth, so that this becomes your version of the SiTUATE platform. Highly customizable, even to the point that the dashboards and the fields you're seeing on various screens can be customized. Ron already sort of went left to right here on the tabs, but I'm just going to review. So the first part of utilizing SiTUATE is sort of the hard work of structured on-the-job training, right? You have to plan. You have to do the work, right? You've got to do the job analysis and get your occupations described. You've got to break them down into duties and tasks. You've got to do the task analysis on each one of those tasks, especially the ones that are going to require training, so the training guides can be developed. As Ron mentioned, there are a couple of other tools here available as well in SiTUATE. When you get into the training guides, there's a library that we'll take a look at for all of the final versions of your documents that are published. The training guides are there, as well as a couple of other options available under that training guides menu. The actual training and meetings occur here. These are not only the on-the-job training meetings, but also you can have meetings amongst the design group. If you've got a group of people that need to get together to perform the job or task analysis, you can organize those meetings through SiTUATE as well. There's a place for you to manage your database of trainers and trainees, and then some reporting as you would expect. But let's just begin at the beginning and start looking at the job analysis. It's worth mentioning that with SiTUATE, you do get access to the SiTUATE Learning Center, which is just a click away. That gets you into Dr. Jacobs' sort of website with all of his learnings and teachings there. So you are just a click away from all those resources if you want to reference something with respect to doing a proper task analysis and so forth. But let's take a look at the documents themselves. And as Ron said, we're going to focus on the tech support specialist today. You know, if this was my organization and we've got a variety of different jobs in my organization, ideally then you have a job analysis laid out for each of those positions, and you can see all of those different positions here. But again, we'll focus on the tech support specialist. So we're looking at a completed job analysis document. Let's just take a quick scroll here. And again, I'll mention the customizability, but this gives you a way to track all of the individuals in and out of your organization that have helped create the job and task analysis for this occupation, a listing of the duties and tasks, and then any other fields that you might need to collect with respect to the job. In this case, we put some prerequisites, some required educations and so forth, and then what materials are required. But again, each end customer that acquires SiTUATE might have different needs in terms of the data you want to collect on your particular positions, and these forms are customizable. Now, as you would expect, you know, this is a dynamic database. So as you create and save these things, I could come in, if it's a year later and something about this particular job has changed, I could come in and add a duty or remove a duty from this position. You can see the input screen is very intuitive. And it's just going to sort of walk you through the process. And if there's a new task for this first duty, I could simply add it a year later, hit save, republish the PDF, and all of my documents are up to date without having to sort of reinvent the wheel or recreate a Word document or keep track of who's got the most recent version of this Word document. It's all in the system for you. But it's easy enough to come through, as I said, and as the job analysis is completed, you're simply inputting into the proper fields. If a certain task requires training, you just check the box, and that'll trigger some more functionality in SiTUATE, so that at this point, we would need to now do a task analysis on task A4 here and develop training guides for that as well, since this particular task is going to require some training. But as you finish the input process, again, you're just looking at that page that we saw a moment ago here, which is sort of a summary of the job analysis document. You can see here on each of the tasks, the ones that are checked, you saw me just check this one a moment ago for requires training. So now it's saying, hey, you've got another task analysis to do here, and it hasn't even been begun yet. If it were in progress, like I had started it, it would say in progress. You can see we've got a few other tasks here that Dr. Jacobs has already completed. They're ready to go. But let's come in and just take a look at one of them that is completed. This is the task analysis. Again, it's a very structured input format. It just sort of walks you through any fields that you've already keyed in at the higher level, right? It goes job to task to training guides, right? All of the data fields that are in common between those forms will flow down so that you're not re-inputting the same information over and over again. We've got our same panel of experts, for example, helping with this task analysis that did the job analysis. Maybe a lot of the same resources that were listed on the job are required for this particular task. same prerequisites. You can certainly make customizations on a task-by-task basis if you need to, as you set these up. Pardon me. You can see then for each task, you are spelling out the steps that are going to be trained upon as well. And you can see you've got the flexibility here to set these tasks up with a variety of different task types. Each task type would trigger possibly some different data columns here as well for you to fill in. So it's a very dynamic form. But at the end of the day, you know, if you've done your task analysis, this gives you a great template to use to get it keyed into the system. And then once keyed in, it just sort of flows downstream into the training guides as well. You can see SiTUATE provides you with the opportunity to have a separate version of the training guide, one for the trainee to see and use, and one for the trainer. The primary difference being the trainer version of the training guide gives the designer the ability to put notes in for the trainer. If there are certain points of emphasis, certain things they want the trainer to know as they're reviewing this with the trainee, they can put the training notes on the trainer's version of the training guide. These training notes are also a special field that will pop up in the online meeting itself, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But all of those documents are built and generated through the S-OJT process. And then as you can see, once everything's ready to go, this one I have not published yet, but if I just hit publish, what it's going to do is it's going to create a PDF version of all this finalized information. It'll take the PDF and show it to us here in just a moment. And then it'll put a copy in the library for us. So here's the published version, right? We're done with this task analysis. Again, these document templates are provided with SiTUATE. We'll give you a default version of the templates, but you then have the ability to customize these templates. Obviously, your organizational logo, other language that you might have to have on the documents can be in place. And then the formatting is all yours to decide as well. If there's something about the template formatting that you'd like to change, that's perfectly fine. Once published, though, you can see we've got the training guides here. When you get back to the job analysis level, you can see all of the sub-documents attached to this job analysis here. I've got a handful of task analysis documents and training guides for this job all in one place. So I'm just a click away from getting any one of those PDFs. Additionally, I mentioned the document library. As documents get published, they'll get placed in this document library. Now you've got flexibility here as well. You can create extra folders and put extra resources in the library for your team if you need to. But in general, what SiTUATE is going to do is if you've got a job title like commercial loan officer or tech support specialist, as you know, each job that you complete an analysis on will get a folder in the document library, and all the various documents for the tasks and training guides will get published under that folder as well. All right, let's assume all the hard work of S-OJT is done. We're done with the planning. We've done our job and task analysis and generated our training guides. So now we're ready to roll out to our organization a consistent training program, which is great. But you know, again, as I said earlier, if something changes 6 months, 2 years down the road, these jobs are going to change, especially in technology. You have the ability to go in and make a few quick edits on the task in question, republish the training guides, and you're done. You don't have to spend a lot of time regenerating new documents, worrying about version control, things of that nature. Everything's just managed through the system. So now we're ready to roll that training program out. Let's talk about how we do this. Well, first thing you need to have a training program is some people that need to be trained, right? So that's our trainee database here. Let's take a look at them. So this would be a database of people that could come from a variety of places, right? Obviously, you have the ability to key them in one at a time if you're so inclined. We have import utilities as well. If you've got a department of 100 people and you need them trained on some particular tasks, we can help you with an import so that you could just load those folks via an Excel spreadsheet into the system and get them on file. Let's take a look at Tanya Techie here. She's going to get trained as a tech support specialist. You'll have the ability to customize this profile. What information do you need to have on file for each trainee? You may or may not need their address and contact information, certainly an email address, maybe a cell phone number, something like that, as well as their name. And then you can have other data administratively, whatever you need for your own purposes, reporting and whatnot, can be on the trainee's profile. One field that is vital, though, to allowing SiTUATE to function properly is this job title. This job title is nothing more than a drop-down selector of all of the different job analysis documents that you've completed in the system. So by selecting this particular job title for Tanya, the system knows, okay, we know what she needs to be trained on, because it can look at that job analysis, it can see the duties and tasks and which ones require training, and it can immediately generate for her a training plan. And that can be found here under the performance checks tab, where any tasks that Tanya gets trained on will have a performance check completed and a training guide generated. And I'll show you both of these documents a bit later after we have a training session with Tanya. But you see the benefit here, right? You've got a database of all the people that need to be trained, and then you've got a repository for everything that they have been trained on, which lends itself really, really well to reporting and understanding, where are our deficits in terms of our staff and what they need to be trained on. So that's the trainees. That's the first half of the puzzle. The second thing you need, obviously, is somebody to train them, and that's your database of trainers. Now, again, every organization may have a slightly different idea as to how that's best accomplished. In some organizations, it's just a more senior person who knows the job that the trainee is going to learn from. In other cases, it's dedicated trainers in an HR department, whatever it might be. But to get the most out of SiTUATE, you would, again, want to have a little database of these trainers. Again, these can be manually input or imported from a spreadsheet, depending on your volume. And again, you've got a flexible profile. If you want to track certain pieces of information on the trainers, such as what positions can they train for, what departments do they train for, things of that nature, you can customize the profile on your trainers as needed. But with those two databases in place and all of your S-OJT analysis done, you're ready to conduct some training meetings. So let's take a quick look at how that works. As you set up a training appointment, I'll just do one quickly here that will be maybe a little nonsense. I don't want to waste your time training, but let's just set up a training on February 10th, and we'll just pick this first task here. That's fine. This is not for the tech support specialist, but we're just setting up a generic training appointment. Again, customizable form. You can get the fields that you need, but it is important for you to know that a given training meeting, you can say, is this an hour? Is this 4 hours? How long is the training? How many time slots are there going to be on this day for training? Most cases one, but you could have sort of back-to-back training sessions for different people. That's fine. And you could have one-on-one training, or you could have, one trainer doing 3 trainees at a time, right? Or whatever number you want. So you can do 1 to multiple training if you're so inclined. Where will the training take place? Is it on the factory floor? Is it a virtual meeting? What is it, right? So you can have a little pick list of locations. Is it a virtual or an in-person meeting? Your call. And then the last thing you really need to do is simply pick the time of the training. Let's just say it's at noon. Once that's done, then you're simply saying, okay, we've identified the trainer. Let's identify the trainee for this. And we'll just pick this first person. You can then have the system send an email to this person explaining, this is going to go on your calendar, this training appointment at this date and time. You can attach documents from the library if you want to, and send that person an email and have the appointment scheduled through the system. All well and good. And I do have an appointment set up right now for that Tanya techie to get trained on the tech support specialist. So let's take a look at that. So first of all, let's presume that I'm the trainer. Okay, I'm the trainer. I've logged into SiTUATE. I'm here for my training session today. You can see how the trainer notes pop up, and I could read through all of the notes there that the designer had set up for me on this particular session, and I can see that I'm due to train Tanya. Well, I'm about 20 minutes late for this appointment, but that's okay. Notice the little video camera here too. SiTUATE comes with a built-in virtual meeting tool if you need it, right? If you're fortunate enough to be able to train in person, maybe a year from now, the world is back to normal and everybody's everybody's back at work, that would be great. Then you could do in-person training, but SiTUATE is built to accommodate virtual training as well. And it really is as simple as hitting that little camera and joining the virtual meeting. And you can see the virtual meeting room is what you would expect, right? There's a microphone control, a camera control, the ability to share screen. There's a guided walkthrough that really is nothing more than, how do I use this page, right? If somebody's unfamiliar with it for the first time, it's just gonna walk them through. We have help like this built in. And there's also a lot of technical support information as well, if it is needed. And of course, text chat. So it is a fully functioning virtual meeting room in SiTUATE as well. And it just opens up in another window. So you could, you know, if you're using 2 monitors, you could have the virtual meeting on one screen and you could still have SiTUATE or other things open in your browser in the background. Now, the trainee themselves has a much simpler interface. You know, the designers, the administrators, the HR folks and managers and the trainers use this particular interface for SiTUATE. The trainees have something that is much more simple. You do get a dashboard as well, so you can put whatever content or announcements here that you want for the trainee. It is mobile friendly. As you can see, it's going to keep resizing itself. Tuck the menu away up here. So if the trainee has to be on a mobile device for some reason, maybe like I said, they are on a factory floor or something, they can use SiTUATE on any device. But I'm Tanya here. I'm logged in as Tanya, who's getting the training now, and I'm going to go find my January 27th meeting. And it's just as simple as this, right? I can see who my trainer is, what I'm being trained for. In this case, it's a task to install Windows operating systems. And then I simply hit this same button and I'm going to have the same meeting room that you saw a minute ago. Since it's my very first time in as Tanya, you can see I immediately get the on-screen help popped up. It knows I haven't been here before, and off I go. So the virtual training could take place that way. Now let's sort of tie a bow around this. I know we're getting close to time here, but now that we've had our training session, it is the responsibility of the trainer to do what we call a performance check. And you can see I'm back to being the trainer. I've got a link right here to do the performance check for the training that was just conducted. So it's got the fields pre-filled. It knows this was for Tanya. It knows what task we were training for and all of that. It knows the steps from the training guide that we're going to be trained upon. So it pre-fills all of that for you. And now it's just up to the trainer to really sort of rate the trainee's performance. And were they able to complete this? Yes. They can inject any comment they want. And then how did they do on each of the other steps, right? Whatever the comments might be. And then at the end of it all, they're simply picking the date and then rating the trainee as qualified or not qualified for this particular task that they've just been trained for. And when I'm all said and done, I have the ability to save it. I could then publish this to Tanya's file, and it's part of Tanya's permanent record. So just a quick look at the performance check. Again, I'll save the time here and not hit publish, but it would, as before, it would simply create the PDF and show it to you, let you print it if you want to, and store it in Tanya's file. Now let's just go ahead and do it. We've got a minute, shouldn't take too long. So there we go, there's a finalized performance check. And as I mentioned, with all of the other templates, if you need a different format, if you need some different signatures, if you need some legal disclaimer, whatever you might need on your documents, it's customizable for each SiTUATE customer. If we go back to Tanya's file, we can now see the new performance check there as well. And let's just have a quick peek at her training plan before we got here today. So it had been filled in with one other task, and you can see this is the one we just trained on. And if I wanted to regenerate a new training plan with the new information, I can do that here, and I can get the final rankings on that as well. One other thing I'd like to show, we haven't talked about it yet, but the concept of reporting is important, right? You need to be able to, at some point, show measurable progress with your training program. Now, Dr. Jacobs is, I know, talking to folks about maybe collecting some results at the end of all this. But for now, I just wanted to give you some inkling as to the reporting capability of the platform. And so I put some simple reports together here. In this case, I called it training appointment metrics. Let's just see what we've done here. So everything gets logged through the system. So in this case, we've had 51 total training appointments here through this demo site. You can see the timing of the, by month. You see, activity by trainer. This is just to give you some idea of the types of reports that you could generate through SiTUATE. And of course, more reports will be coming down the road as we get more results back as well. With that, I think I've covered everything, unless you would like to add something, Ron, or if any of the folks in attendance have any questions.
Well, thank you, Dave. That's a great demonstration overview of the platform. I'd like to add just one more thing people might be curious about and be important for them to know is the fact that when they go to the performance check could be done live by observing the trainee live, or we could record the trainee doing something, or there could be a Dropbox for the trainee if the end of the task required the trainee to produce something. All of that's possible. And also the system accommodates more than one rater as well. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why SiTUATE has been of some interest to apprenticeship programs, because then you could have different people peeking in and participating in the rating. It could be maybe from the training institution, it could be from the manager in the employer setting, and also from the trainer as well. So that's one thing I'd like to share with you. And I think you also mentioned that when the performance check is completed, then it's updated into the trainee's training plan, which I think you did mention, but I just wanted to mention that again. So great, thanks a lot.
You bet.
Okay, so let me ask if there's any questions at this point. We can.
I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you for the presentation. It was really nice. I wanted to know about, connecting to another system, right? For users, for the back and forth. Like in my case, I'm looking at it from the point of view of one step in the performance review. So for that purpose, the trainer or the manager or the supervisor, whatever we call it, and the user's information would be coming from our database. It would, is that possible, or do we have to set them up here separately?
We do have APIs that allow data to be transferred in and out of the platform. So
okay.
There is the possibility to interact with other systems at a data level. We don't have any true, what I would call an integration, where if you've got a tool, a Workday tool or an HR tool, whatever it might be, it doesn't really plug in, but data integrations are possible, and we do it with a great many of our customers.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Great, thank you. That's a question we get a lot. A related question is whether or not it fits into an existing larger learning management system.
Yeah.
And whether or not our system has a very modest management system that's integrated with everything else, but then whether or not it could be folded into a larger management system, learning management system, is that question as well. And Dave, you want to expound on that just for, is it the same answer basically?
It essentially is the same answer.
Okay.
Yes, we have the ability to integrate the data. We have another tool that I didn't demonstrate today. For our university customers, the tool is called Career Tracker. It essentially allows you to have a training plan or syllabus type of list of things to present to the trainee. So you could put content in that way. I think we hesitate to call ourselves a full-blown learning management system, but we have some learning management type functionalities that can be built in.
Could those be like links into our learning management system? So I've been thinking the training guide that you were talking about. I mean, in our case, I would probably call it the development plan, because it would be towards the end of the performance review. And then based on how they score well or not well or on the scale, then the relevant training material gets populated. But those training materials, the links to those training materials would sit in our system, and that could work, right?
That is exactly how a lot of our customers use the tool that we call Career Tracker. It's simply giving some description, giving some background, and giving a link to the actual content in another system.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you.
One other distinction between the way this is set up and I think maybe a learning management system is that the way this is set up is based on tasks and not necessarily like on course titles. And so the tasks would be generated from that job analysis. So it's linked to what people are expected to perform on the job. But that can be, in the same way, it's just a matter of what label you give that set of work or
Right.
that learning opportunity.
Right, and this grid that you have on screen right now is kind of essentially the grid that we have, and it's just called competencies and skills, right?
Right.
There's certain
Right.
competencies that we want people to be good at, and the specific skills that they need to master to do that.
Right.
And at the end of, parallel to each skill in the list, there would be something that they could be trained on.
Right. Right.
So that's kind of how I'm mapping it in my head, but. Just the interface is interesting because when you put this kind of a review in a learning management system, it gets very complicated to look at. This is not complicated, so this could very well be the landing page or the place they go to for that particular step in the performance review or development
right.
cycle. The career growth is the name of our project right now. Is just establishing levels and career paths and all that.
Right.
So kind of fits in pretty well, but it's just that how would it work with the LMS? It's just probably something I would still.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So I appreciate that. The crosswalk that you're seeing right now is much more oriented for very similar maybe to what you're talking about, but the idea of apprenticeships that work from an occupational standard and how when an apprentice goes into an employer situation, how the tasks that they perform, how are those related to the occupational standard? But it could be the same notion that you're describing as well.
Yeah, it's just from the other side, these people are already on the job. They're at a maybe different level 1, level 2, and these things help them get to the next level. So we're evaluating them where they are today and helping them get to the next level, pretty much on the same lines.
Right, and we're kind of calling this, and I think it's an additional feature to SiTUATE, a digital wallet that the trainee or the individual would have possession of, so that they could show, and they could keep track of themselves. Where are they? What have they completed in relationship to a standard?
Oh, that would be awesome.
So, great. Well, thank you very much for the question. That's a great question. You kind of hit upon a lot of the things that a lot of people ask about it, and that's great. If there's any other questions or thoughts after seeing the demonstration, what I wanted to do, this is not meant to be an oversales presentation at all, but I just wanted to summarize some of the things. I think it's important to kind of summarize some of the information that we've talked about. SiTUATE is not something for like a learning management system that would be a repository of courses of all types that you could have access to. It focuses on skills development. And so when people ask me, is SiTUATE an LMS? I tell them no, it's really a training system because it gives you the ability to analyze the work, to prepare the training materials, deliver the training, evaluate trainee performance, and manage that process. And then that process can be connected to the larger management system that an organization might have. What's really important, I think, is that it integrates job and task analysis. As you can maybe kind of see, I don't know, we have to be very quick, but if you're interested, we can do another demonstration and go slow. That you can see when you do the job analysis, you can identify the tasks for training, in some instances, people have been asking for whether or not there can be a job analysis inventory that could be generated and emailed like a survey monkey, that people would have a better sense, instead of just check marking what is appropriate for training. They're in a large organization where many people may have different stakeholders, to be a larger number of inputs for that. But still, the information would come back into the system and be responded to. The other aspect is to be able to deliver the S-OJT flexibly. You can evaluate the trainees based on the tasks. With every task, there could be prerequisite knowledge. And if there's maybe a test or something like that, we didn't see that, but on the spreadsheet for each of the trainees, there is a column that we've put for inputting if there's a test. There is no test development capability at this time on SiTUATE, but it would not be a very difficult thing to attach something to it. What we haven't talked about is that there's an onboarding template. So every time you identify tasks for training, it also gets pre-filled into the onboarding template, so that you end up with a module like a training guide in the other cases that a manager, supervisor could go through with a new hire to identify, here are the tasks that you will be expected to perform in the future. So as an onboarding part, as part of the onboarding process as well. Our research has shown, and this is not just boast, but this is plenty of academic scholarly research has shown that S-OJT, and we suspect that SiTUATE will have the same outcomes, has greater efficiency than unstructured OJT or classroom training to learn particular tasks. That means almost to a factor of 1 to 4, we have found almost 30 years of evidence that we can cut time down by that amount, a proportion of 1 to 4. And we have shown dramatic increases in the quality of work. When people learn through S-OJT and through SiTUATE, it forces them to actually perform the tasks that they will be expected to perform on the job, showing that it gives them an opportunity for feedback from the trainer. One thing we didn't really look at on the platform was that there is an embedded train the trainer program when experienced employees are expected to be trainers. And so if there's a certification requirement, for example, FDA, Food and Drug Administration, or ISO, or anything like that, there's a way of documenting a certificate program, a qualification for your trainers. Another thing I think Dave mentioned is that when you update your materials, all the updates go downstream, so that it goes from the task or the job duty, the tasks, the materials, the training guides, and into the performance checks as well. So you don't have these different versions floating around of different documents. And also, as Dave showed us at the end there, you can manage trainee progress real time, that you kind of have an idea. A manager can go in and identify which tasks people are prepared and ready to perform on the job. And also you can look at which trainers are qualified to train on certain tasks. So from both ends, there is that information. I'm going to stop at this point. We're right at this point to say we're going to open it up to discussion and any conversation that you have. I will mention that we have coming up on February 18th, another free is good, a 2-hour session that introduces work analysis. And as we mentioned earlier, one of the issues that many organizations have in addressing structured on-the-job training in this way is they may not have resident skills in job analysis, task analysis, and understanding what the processes are and everything. And I can't say that in 2 hours you're going to become an expert, but at least you will have some working knowledge to be able to either using these skills in combination with SiTUATE or outside of SiTUATE as well. So anyways, now that we have your emails, you will be receiving information. If you're interested to attend, you can pass it on to your colleagues as well. A 2-hour session. And the information is based on my book, Work Analysis in the Knowledge Economy. Okay, I'm going to open it up and see if there's any comments or questions at this point. I appreciate all of your time. Salima, did we answer all the questions that you might have had about this? I know that.
Yes, you did. Thank you. It was
Okay.
very helpful. I
Okay,
appreciate it.
great. Okay. Newton, are you, I don't know if you've had this demonstration before, so be interested in hearing any, you had a couple of things in chat, so.
Yes, I did send a few messages for you. I think, first of all, people will probably use job descriptions instead of doing a task analysis.
Mhm.
Why is that? Is that a problem? Is that okay?
Yeah, well, job descriptions, there's about, I teach a course on work analysis and we teach about job descriptions. And, if you go over to the HRM or OB areas of the College of Business, they teach writing job descriptions in one way and everything. But the way we address this issue is that we use job descriptions as part of the training guides, so that when we introduce the job to the trainee, we address job descriptions in a rather a 3-sentence format, not a lengthy format, but just 3 sentences. And we do that because we think that information will be transmitted by the trainer to the trainee. And what the trainee is receiving is information about the job, who they report to, why it's important, why their job is important. And so when I talk about a job description, I talk about that more or less that 3-sentence set of information that we use as part of the training, that's introduced. So, other people may say, well, a job description includes all the job duties and tasks and all those kinds of things. But most of the time, it's never a job description or a job analysis that's done comprehensively with actual subject matter experts. So it has a different purpose. It has not a training purpose as far as what I've seen used in organizations. So that's kind of a long explanation to your question. I don't know if it makes sense. Let me know if I can.
It does, because I understand the purpose of a job description, mostly for grading and salary grading.
Yeah.
Sometimes not those kind of reasons, but not for the resolution that you need to see someone actually do something and qualify them on it. The other thing, if I may ask, and forgive me if it's going too far overboard, I can always talk to you later, but the competencies, I heard someone say competencies, and we're talking about skills. I see them as completely different. And I think people confuse them.
Absolutely.
And the thing is about skills, it should be at the level that you can observe and that it has an impact on the job. Competency may not. And I think I just want to hear your comment on that.
Well, we're going to talk about this on February 19th, but of course you don't want to wait till February 19th to hear my opinion. But, this is a big issue in organizations, the use of terminology, and especially the word competency is used in so many different ways. It gets expanded and contracted based on how the organization thinks of it in this way. In my perspective, in the book that I wrote, I used the word individual competency to identify the individual characteristics that people have for success. And that might be personality. Those things are that we expect of people, like customer service orientation would be a competency from my perspective. And there are certain assumptions about those competencies. One of the assumptions is that they can be developed. They can be selected, but they can be developed. Now, in understanding all this, when we think about skills, SiTUATE addresses the question, what is it that people have to know in order to perform the job? It addresses that basic question. when people ask about competencies, they're asking a different question. They're asking the question, what are the personality characteristics of people who are successful in doing this job? And it may not be the job, it may be the role. It may be like a management role or a project manager role that extends beyond just one particular function. So they're different things. And I think it's true that there's a lot of confusion. The problem is that we use the word competence and competency in so many other different ways in organizations as well. And it gets totally confusing. And I have tried in my work to try to clarify all that information, but I try to make sure that people understand that what we are about, that SiTUATE is about, is addressing the major question of what is it that people do on their jobs? What is it that people do on this particular occupation or job of our interest right now? And that's different from the question that most people ascribe to competencies, because that's asking the individual characteristics. And SiTUATE is not designed for that.
So what would be a collection of skills called? So, let's say it's like you said, a role, right? If there's a particular role and, that needs to perform several different types of tasks,
Mhm.
and you need to develop, a whole number of skills to get to a certain point to be able to perform all those different tasks. So would
Right.
that then be clubbed as, I don't know, what would it be called?
We call those duties. So, when a duty is a name for a collection of related tasks. So it's like the
No, so what
name.
would be
Okay.
skills? What would be a collection of skills called?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that from that perspective, you would think about it as a duty statement.
Okay.
Okay, as a duty
Okay.
statement. And I know that, in common terminology in organizations, we use the word competency when we really mean a duty. And
Okay.
I understand that, and I can
Okay.
overcome that. It doesn't bother me, but I just, in my teaching and the way I use it in practice, I try to make sure that people understand that there's quite a big difference between when you're talking about a competency, as it most of the time when people talk about individual competencies, and when we talk about skills on that side,
Mhm.
it's at the duties and the tasks. Now, let me add one more thing that I want to comment that a comment that you made, Newton, is that when you think about at the skill level, we have to address the issue of knowledge work. And a lot of knowledge work has to do with things, tasks that people do that are not observable. They are measurable, but they are not observable. So watching somebody troubleshoot something may not be observable in all cases, but it's still a unit of work that's done from the beginning to the end. It has an outcome. And that's one of the things that's really important. And I think that is important for SiTUATE to have that flexibility to address not only what you might consider, routine work that might be more procedural in nature, steps and things like that, but also more knowledge work where people are managing, people are coordinating, scheduling, designing, those kinds of tasks.
Excellent observation, and I agree. There are cognitive tasks that people do that you don't see.
Right. Right.
And you probably heard of cognitive task analysis. And the Department of Transportation, U.S. government has used cognitive task analysis. And that, I don't know if that's the approach to SiTUATE, but I do know that is one way to get at those things that you don't see as behaviors.
Well, the interesting thing about most jobs these days is that there's a combination of work involved. You have people even at the frontline roles who are doing things, they may be entering something on the computer, or, those might be more procedural stepwise kinds of tasks, but they may be working with customers too. And they may be making decisions, in terms of policy and those kinds of things. And so those kinds of things are extended beyond. They have some ambiguity in them. And you still have to have the ability to define what that task is, and to the extent possible, to be able to document the components, the behavioral components of that task as well. if you're interested, Salima, I can share with you a big project that we did using S-OJT in the training of new hire engineers, where all of the work that they do can be considered knowledge work, if that's, within your organization. I'm not sure, I did a little background work of your organization, but I wasn't sure where your target was in terms of
Well,
that.
actually, I am at a stage where we are just identifying the tool. The groundwork is done, and I'm not the person doing that. I'm
Okay.
just a digital person. So
Okay.
I
Okay.
am responsible for identifying a tool that can accommodate everything that's already been prepared. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to receive that. I can share it on with the rest of the team, but the groundwork is already in place, and we're identifying the tool where we can have it be
Sure.
used, and it's kind of seamless for the users.
Sure. Sure. Well, anybody that's interested in more information about knowledge work and structured on the job training for knowledge work and those kinds of things, I can send you materials on that. That's one of the issues that we are facing now, is that we can't allow, when we think about on the job training, we can't allow the type of the work necessarily to define the limits of the training approach. So we have to see what are the expanded limits of that training approach, because work is changing these days. If I may, I know that we're running low on our time here, but let me tell you a quick story. We did a study of 5 different industrial companies, small, medium-sized industrial companies in the Chicago area. And we looked at the team leader job across these 5 companies. And we did a job analysis, and we did a forecasted job analysis, which would be a skills gap analysis to see which tasks would change in 2 years from now. And what we found was, from the core forecast, was that this team leader job, which is kind of a directly connecting with frontline employees on the production floor, and then also maybe not has extensive supervisory responsibility, but they are going to be involved with digital technology, interpreting data, reviewing performance results from machine operations, and those kinds of things. These are all new things that they've never done before. And so being analytical and interpreting data is a brand new skill. And so we have to figure out, from a training perspective, to make sure that those as work changes, we have to figure out the ways that we can adapt to that and make sure that we can accommodate how work is changing. If anybody's interested in that, I'd be willing to. We did a very nice presentation at a professional conference, and we have that available for sharing as well. Are there any other comments or questions? This is a great conversation. Maybe some of these questions are some of the things on how work has changed, and how we in our practice have to respond to those changes as well. Well, I would like to thank everybody, both here in attendance and also who will be watching this later on in a recorded version. Thank you very much. If you have interest in knowing more about SiTUATE and knowing more about structured on-the-job training, please contact us. On the screen is our website, and we also have a large presence on LinkedIn, and also we have a YouTube channel as well that you can see some overview videos as well. I'm going to close here, and thank you all so very much for your time. I hope that you all have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.